Chapter 2785, Differences Gradually Emerge. Chapter 2785, Differences Gradually Emerge. Meteorite City, Main Street. As Shifeng walked through the city's main street, he noticed a visible change in the city's players. The number of Tier 3 experts roaming the main street was around 10% more than before. While this increase didn't seem significant, if one street saw a 10% increase to its Tier 3 traffic, then the other streets should have experienced a similar increase as well. In other words, Meteorite City as a whole had gained a 10% increase to its Tier 3 player population. In the case of Meteorite City, such an increase meant that the city had gained over 100,000 more Tier 3 experts, a number that probably exceeded even the total of the 5 great superguilds' Tier 3 experts. Aside from the Tier 3 player population, another evident change had also occurred to the city's atmosphere. To be precise, an atmosphere of tension and excitement now enveloped the city. Before Shifeng could start looking into the city's situation, though, he overheard a conversation between several Tier 3 experts in a nearby open-air bar. Crap. My application actually got rejected. I'm a level 131, Tier 3 ranger, for God's sake. Any other adventurer team or guild would be more than happy to welcome me with open arms. Skyflare is simply too arrogant, a tanned, robust youth snarled. A level 132 middle-aged man carrying a round shield shook his head and chuckled at the male youth's complaint. You're not the only one. The number of Tier 3 expert Skyflare is rejecting currently ranges between 700 to 1,000 daily. Less than 10% of those who apply at Skyflare actually get in. Moreover, Skyflare's recruitment criteria are growing stricter by the day. That's right. The present Skyflare is no longer the same as before. It already has 4 Tier 4 experts. Moreover, according to insider information, 2 of them managed to reach Tier 4 thanks to the Crystal of Souls and Soul Water. From what I heard, Skyflare still has plenty of Crystals of Souls and Soul Water, a level 131, Tier 3 assassin youth said, agreeing with the middle-aged man's words. I heard that one of those 2 newly promoted Tier 4 experts relied on only the Soul Water to get promoted, the middle-aged man added. The Crystal of Souls is incomparably rare, but it's a different story for the Soul Water. Even Skyflare's normal members have a chance to get a drop of Soul Water. Right now, if you lined up the people trying to join Skyflare, the line would probably extend from one end of the city to the other. I also heard that news of this has reached the neighboring cities' Tier 3 experts, and many of them are already making their way to Meteorite City. Once they arrive, the number of Skyflare's applicants will definitely skyrocket. If I'd known something like this would happen, I would have joined Skyflare long ago. Even if I can't get my hands on a Crystal of Souls, I would still be able to get a drop of Soul Water and maybe get promoted to Tier 4 and live a good life in the civilian area, the assassin youth sighed. The Skyflare Adventurer team had recently raised its recruitment standards. Now, even ordinary Tier 3 experts wouldn't be accepted. At the very least, one needed to be at the half-step Refinement Realm Standard or Truth Realm Standard to join. It seems Skyflare has recently developed quite a bit. When Shifeng overheard the Tier 3 players' conversation, he didn't feel particularly surprised. After all, the Skyflare Adventurer team possessed a bunch of peak experts. In addition, unlike the modern era's experts, the ancient era's experts had long since regarded God's domain as their everything. The combat standards of the players here were far superior to those of the modern era's players. If not for the ancient God's domain lacking means of restoring one's concentration, there would have been many more Tier 4 players roaming the world. After all, the ancient era's players had a massive advantage when it came to getting promoted to Tier 4. Afterward, Shifeng eavesdropped on a few more conversations about Skyflare's and Meteorite City's current state. From what he heard, he understood that Skyflare was preparing to expand its influence to other NPC main cities, and it was recruiting the necessary manpower to do so. Once it had enough Tier 3 experts, it would most likely make a beeline for the neighboring main cities. As for the local player forces of those main cities, they would probably have difficulty stopping Skyflare's encroachment. This was welcome news for Shifeng. After all, the stronger Skyflare became, the easier obtaining all sorts of resources would be. After listening in on a few more conversations and finding no more useful information, Shifeng went to the Silver Hotel. Silver Hotel, high-end room, When Shifeng entered the room, he found lifeless Thorn and the others waiting for him. Of the 5 people in the room, 3 looked elated while 2 looked crestfallen. Shifeng also noticed that the auras of the 3 had undergone a qualitative transformation. These 3 people were lifeless Thorn, solitary 9, and Yu Luo. As the 3 of them did not wear a black cloak to conceal themselves, their Tier 4 life auras were on full display. "Commander, we've let you down," Yang Ya said in a depressed tone as she watched Shifeng walk over. Cleansing Whistle, who stood beside Yang Ya, was also gloomy. It was evident she felt frustrated over her failure to get promoted to Tier 4. No need to be discouraged. Getting promoted to Tier 4 has never been easy. Even peak experts have a high chance of failure, let alone your present selves, Shifeng said in consolation. Moreover, now that you know where you're lacking, you can spend this time thinking of ways to address your flaws. I believe it won't be long before you too reach Tier 4 as well. Shifeng didn't feel particularly surprised by Yang Ya and Cleansing Whistle's failure. In fact, he wouldn't even have found it strange if Lifeless Thorn and Solitary 9 had failed. After all, the Tier 4 promotion quest truly was a difficult hurdle to cross, one players couldn't overcome just by relying on combat standards. It required players to comprehend Tier 4 skills and spells under time constraints. However, there was a massive difference between Tier 3 and Tier 4 skills. Learning a Tier 4 skill to 80% completion rate within a limited period was an incredibly difficult feat. In fact, a large part of the reason why Shifeng had managed to complete his own promotion quest was his extensive experience, having undergone it several times before. In comparison, Yang Ya and Cleansing Whistle did not have such experience. Hence, their failure was very normal. According to past statistics, 99% of the various superpowers core members failed their Tier 4 promotion quest when they challenged it for the first time. Most never reached Tier 4. Those capable of reaching Tier 4 had normally experienced 2 or 3 failures before succeeding, with some even having suffered 5 or 6 failures. Hence, Tier 4 could be considered an invisible barrier that thoroughly distinguished players from each other. It was also because of this invisible barrier that an insurmountable gap had formed between the various superpowers and ordinary powers. Upon hearing Shifeng's words, Yu Luo nodded subconsciously in agreement, as she had very nearly failed her promotion quest this time. Were it not for the Soul Water's help, she definitely wouldn't have finished learning her Tier 4 spell within the allotted time. "Guild leader, can Whistle and I remain here, then?" Yang Ya asked Shifeng. Unlike the modern God's Domain, players here were not required to search for their legacy land when challenging their Tier 4 promotion quest. They could attempt their promotion so long as they paid the necessary magic crystals. The only problem was that players who failed their promotion quest had to wait 20 natural days before they could challenge it again. This, Shifeng was at a loss as to how to answer Yang Ya. "I can't say for certain. I don't mind letting you challenge your promotion quests again 20 days later. However, I honestly don't know whether you can remain here for such a long period." The old man did not say how long they could stay in the ancient God's domain. They also didn't know what would hasten their departure from the ancient era. Of course, they weren't completely without options for leaving. Previously, the old man had said that if they drew the attention of the world of God's domain, they would be repatriated to the modern era. In other words, so long as they did something to make the world notice them, they would quickly be banished. One possibility Shifeng could think of was raiding the Tier 4 infant dragon themselves, without Angelica Teresa's help. Angelica Teresa was a historical figure in the modern God's domain. If the miracle of her slaying a Tier 4 infant dragon disappeared, the world of God's domain would most likely notice them. If even that didn't work, they could just cause a ruckus in the ancient era, such as killing important NPCs and affecting God's domain's history. The world would definitely notice them then. However, Shifeng didn't know when they could return to the ancient era again in that case. He also didn't know what kind of effects their actions would have on the world. "Is that so?" Yang Ya and Cleansing Whistle couldn't help feeling helpless when they heard Shifeng's answer. If they returned to the modern God's domain, reaching Tier 4 would become many times more difficult. After all, the task of searching for their Tier 4 legacy land was incredibly challenging afterward. Lifeless Thorn, Solitary 9, and Yu Luo shared their experiences learning their respective Tier 4 skills and spells with Yang Ya and Cleansing Whistle. At the same time, the three of them also sought guidance from Shifeng regarding the combat methods of Tier 4 players. They were especially keen to learn how to utilize environmental mana in combat. After reaching Tier 4, they finally understood just how massive the gap between Tier 3 and Tier 4 classes was. Particularly, the way they controlled mana was completely different. As the first among them to reach Tier 4, Shifeng naturally had a better understanding in this regard. After Shifeng taught Lifeless Thorn's group for half an hour, Skyflare's commander, Lionheart, suddenly contacted him. In the ancient god's domain, if two players were too far away from each other, video calls between them would be impossible. At most, they could only exchange messages. The transmission of messages wasn't instantaneous, either. Depending on the distance, the transmission times would also vary. In the aspect of communication, the ancient god's domain was far inferior to the modern god's domain. However, it was this inferiority that made the ancient era feel more like a real world. "Brother Black Flame, you're finally back," Lionheart said, a hearty look appearing on his face when he saw Shifeng. "May I know when we can meet up?" "We can meet up now. I've already dealt with the matters on my side," Shifeng replied, smiling. "It just so happens that I need to discuss the previous matter with you." From Lionheart's expression, Shifeng could tell that the crystals of souls and soul water were of significant help to the Skyflare adventurer team. Otherwise, Lionheart wouldn't have contacted him as soon as he returned. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU OK. Let's meet in the Skyflare Hotel. I've already prepared everything on my side, Lionheart said, smiling. I also have a big surprise prepared for you, Brother Black Flame. No problem. I'll head over now. Shifeng nodded. He then disconnected the call and turned to Lifeless Thorn and the others. The three of you should get ready. We'll be heading to the Skyflare Hotel in a moment, and we might begin the operation right away. In response, Lifeless Thorn, Solitary 9, and Yu Luo nodded without hesitation. They understood that they were what Shifeng had been waiting for all this time. Now that they had completed their promotion quests, it was indeed time to take action. As for Yang Ya and Cleansing Whistle, Shifeng decided to let the two of them remain in Meteorite City in the hopes that they could avoid the world's detection and challenge their Tier 4 promotion quests again 20 days later. Shortly afterward, Shifeng's four left the Silver Hotel and made their way to the Skyflare Hotel. Chapter 2786, Foundation vs. Foundation? Chapter 2786, Foundation vs. Foundation? Meteorite City, Skyflare Hotel. Due to the arrival of Shifeng's group of four, Skyflare's executives had decided to assemble in full. As a result, the conference room serving as the meeting venue seemed a bit crowded despite being the size of a basketball court. Over 100 Skyflare executives filled the conference room, every one of them at level 133 or above. Even the weakest among those present were at the Refinement Realm and Truth Realm standards. The number of peak experts exceeded 20. If Skyflare operated in the modern god's domain with such a force, it would be considered a top adventurer team that even the various superpowers would be wary of. After all, only the superpowers could match such a force. First-rate guilds wouldn't even dream of accomplishing a similar feat. In addition, among Skyflare's executives, 5 possessed incredibly strong life auras, proof that they had crossed the Tier 4 threshold already. Compared to the rumors floating around the city, Skyflare actually had one more Tier 4 player under its command. Of the 3 newly promoted Tier 4 players, one of them was the female assassin Crimson Billow. The remaining 2 were both vice-commanders of Skyflare. One of them was Bloodblade, a level 135 male berserker, while the other was Fated Fern, a level 135 female oracle. "What do you think, Brother Black Flame?" Lionheart asked when he saw Shifeng enter the room. Pointing at the gathered Skyflare members, he chuckled and said, "These are the elites of Skyflare. Are they to your satisfaction?" "They are indeed excellent." Shifeng nodded in agreement as he scanned the crowd before him. Smiling, he asked, "Is this the surprise you told me about, Commander Lionheart?" Setting aside the 5 Tier 4 experts, just the 100-plus Tier 3 experts present already represented astonishing combat power. Many of these Tier 3 experts sported epic items, with some even boasting fragmented legendary items. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that the total number of fragmented legendary items that Skyflare had exceeded that of any individual superpower operating in the modern era. With such a well-equipped team at his command, Lionheart indeed had the qualifications to be proud. Of course not. Lionheart smiled, shaking his head. He then took out an ancient crystal from his bag and asked, "What do you think this is?" After a casual glance at the crystal, Shifeng immediately revealed a look of surprise on his face. A Tier 5 sealing crystal. Shifeng couldn't help doubting his eyes as he took in the dark grey crystal in Lionheart's hand. Tier 5 magic scrolls were incredibly rare in God's domain because Tier 5 skills and spells possessed astonishing power. The requirement for sealing them in a magic scroll was incredibly high. Moreover, even if one successfully stored a Tier 5 skill, one would be fortunate if the resulting magic scroll could exhibit half of the skill's original power. A sealing crystal, on the other hand, could perfectly seal skills and spells at the Tier 4 standard or above. Moreover, although sealing crystals were one-time use items, they did not impose any usage requirements. Players could freely use the stored skill or spell at 100% potential. Meanwhile, the darker the color of a sealing crystal, the stronger the skill or spell stored inside. Since Lionheart's sealing crystal was dark gray, the sealed skill or spell was at the Tier 5 standard at the very minimum. That's right. This is indeed a Tier 5 sealing crystal, Lionheart said with a faint smile. We got lucky and came across a visiting high noble from another city. After helping him complete an incredibly difficult quest, we were able to purchase this Tier 5 sealing crystal from him. I believe that with this Tier 5 sealing crystal, our operation will proceed much more smoothly. Indeed. If the skill or spell sealed inside is sufficiently powerful, it might be enough to land a heavy blow on the infant dragon, Shifeng said, nodding. While it was true that an unrestrained Tier 4 infant dragon was on par with Tier 5 monsters, that was true only for the average Tier 5 monster. A Tier 4 infant dragon still couldn't stop Tier 5 skills and spells that were above average in power. Hence, this Tier 5 sealing crystal could indeed serve as a trump card in the upcoming raid. Skyflare will assist you with everything it has this time, Brother Black Flame. I have gathered all of Skyflare's top experts. We have a total of 124 people, 5 of whom are at Tier 4. We have also finished distributing the teams. For the following operation, we will all listen to your command, Brother Black Flame, Lionheart said proudly. If you have anyone you wish to include in the team, you can freely make adjustments to the team, as well. I really have to thank you for this, Commander Lionheart, Shifeng said gratefully. While he was somewhat confident of dealing with the Tier 4 infant dragon, he had never actually killed an unrestrained Tier 4 infant dragon. Hence, it wouldn't be strange if their team suffered annihilation. For the Skyflare Adventurer team to give him its full support for such a risky operation required a lot of courage and determination. Nonsense. We are only helping each other, Brother Black Flame. If this operation succeeds, Skyflare will also greatly benefit from it, so how can we not give it our all? Lionheart said. If there are no problems on your side, we can take action at any time. Lionheart understood that their operation this time carried great risks. However, he had decided to go through with it not because he was betting on the low odds of success but to tie Shifeng to his boat. Both the Crystal of Souls and Soul Water were of considerable help to players in completing their Tier 4 promotion quest. One example of this was Crimson Billow, who had failed her promotion quest before. After using a Crystal of Souls, she had completed her promotion quest on the second attempt. In fact, even Bloodblade and Fated Fern had mentioned that without the help of the Crystal of Souls and Soul Water, they would have most likely failed their promotions. Hence, Lionheart began placing even greater importance on the Crystal of Souls and Soul Water. Meanwhile, if he wished to secure a stable supply of these two items, he had to befriend Shifeng. As for the infant dragon raid itself, Lionheart didn't really care whether it succeeded or failed. So long as he could tie Shifeng to his side, he would make a profit. There's no problem on my side. However, we'll need to reorganize the composition of your team, as I am going to add 3 people, Shifeng said. 3 people? Lionheart looked reflexively at the three people standing behind Shifeng. At this time, the three people behind Shifeng had concealed their auras and information using black cloaks. However, based on the appearances they revealed, Lionheart recognized one of them as Yu Luo, whom he had met at the auction house previously. As for the two other people, they should be part of the group that entered Meteorite City with Shifeng. What surprised Lionheart was that Shifeng was actually bringing only 3 people for the operation. After all, they were going to raid an infant dragon, a creature known to be invincible against opponents of the same tier. Let alone a team of 100+ Tier 3 experts, even an army of 10,000 Tier 3 experts might not be enough to defeat the infant dragon. Yet, Shifeng was planning to bring only 3 people to the raid. This is my first time visiting Meteorite City, Shifeng said, nodding. Sorry for the poor display, Commander Lionheart. Nonsense. Since you wish to adjust the team, we naturally don't have a problem with it, Brother Blackflame, Lionheart said, shaking his head. He then invited Shifeng to the team and passed the team leader's authority to Shifeng. Afterward, Shifeng inspected the team's statistics and assigned Skyflare's 5 Tier 5 players to 1 squadron. As for the Tier 3 players, he divided them across 6 squadrons, with 1 squadron having 12 healers and the other 5 having none. Upon seeing Shifeng's team distribution, Skyflare's members were inevitably confused. If their squadrons did not possess a single healer, what would they do when they got damaged? While healers could heal players belonging to different squadrons, placing all of the team's healers in a separate squadron would definitely lower their healing efficiency. Due to positioning issues, the healers wouldn't be able to react immediately if players from other squadrons received damage. However, what Skyflare's members didn't know was that Shifeng had never thought about the team's Tier 3 players taking damage and losing HP. After all, if a Tier 3 player got hit by a Tier 4 infant dragon, even if it were just a scratch, the player would die without question. There was no need for a healer at all. Everyone in the healer squadron must prepare at least 20 Master Mana Recovery Potions and 20 Master Steel Potions. If you don't have enough, you can go buy them now. I'll pay for them, Shifeng said as he looked at the 12 Tier 3 healers. At Shifeng's words, everyone present gasped. A Master Mana Recovery Potion could not only instantly restore a player's mana to full but also increase a player's mana recovery speed by 150% for 3 minutes. With 20 Master Mana Recovery Potions, a healer could last through a battle involving hundreds of thousands of players. A Master Steel Potion was even more extraordinary. At this stage of the game, it was considered a divine life-saving potion. When players consumed the potion, not only would their defense increase by 300%, but their maximum HP would also increase by 1000%. Although the potion only had a 15-second duration, its cooldown was only 60 seconds. If every healer carried 20 Master Steel Potions with them, they would practically be immortal healers, so long as their potion stock lasted. Oh, I almost forgot. Every healer must also carry at least 5 magic scrolls holding Tier 3 defensive curses. It would be even better if you have a Tier 4 defensive magic scroll, Shifeng added. Lionheart felt a little awkward when he heard Shifeng's words. Brother Blackflame, I don't think there are even 20 or 30 magic scrolls holding Tier 3 defensive curses. I'm afraid it'll be impossible to supply every healer with 5. Is that so? After giving the matter some thought, Shifeng said, if that's the case, have everyone bring at least 1. Afterward, Shifeng spent the next half an hour reorganizing and re-outfitting the team until he was satisfied. This should be enough. Looking at the items the team members carried, Shifeng nodded and said, next, we can start making our way over to the dragon. Okay. Lionheart revealed a bright smile when he heard Shifeng's words. He then turned to Wind Chaser and said, Chaser, go make the necessary preparations quickly. Understood. Wind Chaser nodded, aware of Lionheart's intentions. Their purpose in assisting Shifeng this time wasn't to raid the Tier 4 infant dragon but to rope him to their side, as well as show him the power of the Skyflare Adventurer team. Preparations? Aren't we setting off right away? Shifeng asked strangely. Brother Blackflame, you might not be aware of this, but that infant dragon's location is far from Meteorite City. Even if we travel on mounts, it'll take us around 3 days to arrive, Lionheart said. Hence, for the sake of this operation, I contacted the city's high nobles a few days ago to borrow some flying mounts from them. You'll rent flying mounts? Shifeng was a little surprised. He never thought that Lionheart would help him to such an extent. B. Crosby Furious Smiley B. Me B. The Ghostfire Hills where the infant dragon had its lair was indeed distant. Even the shortest route there would require them to cross nearly 30 leveling maps, including some level 140 to level 150 maps along the way. Hence, reaching the infant dragon wouldn't be an easy task. In addition, flying mounts were exceedingly rare in the ancient god's domain, for some reason. They were so rare that no player in Meteorite City had gotten their hands on a flying mount even now. Hence, players who wished to travel across long distances quickly would have to rent flying mounts from the city's high nobles. However, to do so, one would first have to raise their favorability with a high noble to the level of respect. Meanwhile, in Meteorite City, the players eligible to rent a flying mount numbered no more than 10. Moreover, the rental cost was a whopping 5,000 magic crystals per day. Most importantly, players could rent flying mounts only 10 times per month at most. Hence, the city's player forces would normally choose to rent flying mounts only for urgent matters. With so many people participating in the operation this time, Skyflare would have to rent at least 7 flying mounts. In other words, Skyflare would use up 7 of its monthly rental opportunities. That's right. With the flying mounts, we'll need only half a day to reach the Ghostfire Hills, Lionheart said delightedly. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. In the entire Meteorite City, he was most likely the only person who would dare make such a generous move. However, Shifeng shook his head in response and said calmly, "There's no need to rent flying mounts from those high nobles. You'll be wasting your rental opportunities. We can just fly there right away." Fly there right away? Lionheart parroted Shifeng's words in confusion. MHM. Shifeng nodded. Smiling, he said, "I have a flying tool, so we can fly there right away. There's no need for you to trouble yourself." After saying so, Shifeng led Lionheart and the others to the Skyflare Hotel's rooftop. Skyflare's bewildered members followed after Shifeng, trying to figure out what kind of means Shifeng had that could fly their whole team to the Ghostfire Hills. After all, their team had over 120 people. It would take 7 flying mounts just to transport their whole team simultaneously. However, as Skyflare's executives were whispering among themselves, Shifeng opened the lid of a pouch hanging at his waist. The next moment, a metallic behemoth over 100 meters in length emerged from the pouch, thoroughly blocking out the sky above everyone. Chapter 2787, Unfathomable Black Flame. Chapter 2787, Unfathomable Black Flame. A flying ship? How is this possible? Skyflare's members gaped in shock as they looked at the Crimson Dragon flying ship in the sky, unable to get their minds around this scenario. This must be an illusion, Bloodblade declared, his eyes filled with disbelief. This must be fake. How can a flying ship appear in the hands of a player? In an era where players didn't possess even flying mounts, a flying ship was basically an item of legends. In fact, he had only ever seen flying ships mentioned in books before. Not a single flying ship had ever appeared even in a trade city like Meteorite City. According to rumors, only the Holy City's patrol guards had flying ships, which they would use when they patrolled the human territories of God's domain. Flying ships simply weren't objects players could get their hands on. At this moment, let alone Bloodblade, even Lionheart was stunned when he saw the Crimson Dragon flying ship. As for Crimson Billow and Windchaser, after briefly falling into shock, they turned reflexively to look at Shifeng. Who is this black flame? This question continuously resounded in their minds. They had conducted plenty of investigations into Shifeng and his entourage. After all, they were planning a long-term partnership with him, so they had to gain some understanding of him. Only, the more they looked into Shifeng, the more they found him unfathomable. They simply couldn't see through his depths. Initially, they merely assumed Shifeng was a Tier 4 expert from another NPC city. However, after they saw the effects of the Crystal of Souls and Soul Water he took out, they knew that they were definitely mistaken. After all, none of the neighboring NPC cities offered such items. From then onward, They felt that Shifeng was someone extraordinary, potentially the executive of a major power from a distant NPC city. Otherwise, he couldn't have casually taken out such precious items. Not to mention, he also possessed incredible strength as an individual. This was one of the reasons their commander, Lionheart, wished to display Skyflare's strength to Shifeng and rope him to their side. After all, partnering with a major power of such caliber would be of great benefit to the Skyflare adventurer team. Now, Shifeng even brought out a legendary item like the flying ship. They simply couldn't figure out his identity. At this point, the Skyflare adventurer team practically had exclusive ownership of Meteorite City already. Although Skyflare still wasn't comparable to large guilds that occupied several cities, it could already be considered an overlord in God's domain. Even if Skyflare was still inferior to the various top guilds, the distance between them definitely wasn't that massive. When Yu Luo saw the reactions of Skyflare's members, she wasn't particularly surprised. After all, back when Shifeng first revealed the Crimson Dragon flying ship in the modern God's domain, he had similarly shocked the entire world. "Alright, let's head up," Shifeng said before nonchalantly jumping onto the flying ship. The Crimson Dragon flying ship was an advanced flying ship capable of carrying up to 130 people, just enough to accommodate everyone present. At Shifeng's words, Skyflare's members promptly snapped out of their daze. They then silently boarded the Crimson Dragon flying ship while doing their best to suppress the excitement and shock in their hearts, afraid of appearing like provincials to Shifeng's group. Despite their best efforts, their suppressed emotions instantly exploded as soon as they arrived on the flying ship's deck. After all, the feeling of overlooking Meteorite City while standing aboard the Crimson Dragon flying ship was simply wonderful. Just the fact that the Crimson Dragon flying ship was parked in the air above Meteorite City instantly made it the most eye-catching existence in the city. At this time, players and NPCs on the streets were gazing at the flying ship, their eyes wide with shock and envy. They also held heated discussions, curious about why a flying ship would appear above the Skyflare Hotel all of a sudden. The players, in particular, went into an uproar when they saw Skyflare's members aboard the flying ship. However, before Meteorite City's players could come to any conclusions, the Crimson Dragon flying ship began gradually ascending into the sky. Afterward, it transformed into a streak of light and vanished from Meteorite City, even faster than the flying mounts available for rent. How fast? At this speed, we can probably reach the Ghostfire Hills in around a dozen hours, Lionheart exclaimed. He was astonished to see Meteorite City rapidly shrinking behind him. He had ridden flying mounts before. However, compared to the Crimson Dragon flying ship, those flying mounts were significantly slower. The Crimson Dragon flying ship is still alright in terms of speed, Shifeng said calmly. However, while it is indeed slightly faster than common flying mounts, it is still much slower than Tier 3 advanced extraordinary flying mounts. In terms of destructive power, though, it is comparable to Tier 4 advanced extraordinary flying mounts. Although Shifeng had spoken very calmly, Lionheart and the others paid close attention to his every word, afraid that they would miss out on even the tiniest bit of information. "Brother Black Flame, you must have spent a lot of magic crystals to secure this Crimson Dragon flying ship, right?" Lionheart asked after giving the matter some thought. The flying ship he was standing on was simply too cool. From Shifeng's description of it, it was basically a tyrant of the skies. Anyone who said they weren't interested in the Crimson Dragon flying ship would be lying. Quite a lot. "Even now, my guild has only managed to produce 9, Shifeng said, nodding B greater than MB. Most of the materials the Crimson Dragon flying ship needed were relatively common. However, it was a different story for the Titan Silver and Magic Elven Stones required, especially the Magic Elven Stones. Despite having bought out all of the Magic Elven Stones on the market, Zero Wing had managed to construct only 9 Crimson Dragon flying ships until now. 9. Lionheart nearly failed to close his mouth. In his opinion, a guild would be plenty amazing to be able to procure even one of such sky tyrants. Yet, Shifeng's guild had 9? "Are you interested in the Crimson Dragon flying ship, Commander Lionheart?" Shifeng couldn't help chuckling at Lionheart's astonished expression. "I would be lying if I said I wasn't interested in such a treasure." While scanning the flying ship's deck, Lionheart said enviously, If Skyflare could have a flying ship like this, let alone occupying multiple NPC main cities, even going up against the top guilds wouldn't be a problem. The Crimson Dragon flying ship's combat power might not be a big deal for Skyflare now that the adventurer team had 5 tier 4 players, but the flying ship's carrying capacity and speed were simply astonishing. With this flying ship, Skyflare's teams would no longer have a problem leveling up. They could travel to anywhere they wished. Skyflare could even use the flying ship to ferry resources between cities and earn a ton of magic crystals. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that the existence of just one flying ship could allow Skyflare to undergo a qualitative transformation. Skyflare's executives nodded in agreement with Lionheart's words. It would be wonderful if their adventurer team could get their hands on a treasure like the Crimson Dragon flying ship. In fact, even if Skyflare gained an additional dozen or so tier 4 players, the value these tier 4 players could bring wouldn't even be close to what one flying ship could bring. A faint smile appeared on Shifeng's face as he said, "Commander Lionheart, since you are so interested in the Crimson Dragon flying ship, I can sell one to the Skyflare adventurer team." The instant Shifeng finished speaking, every one of Skyflare's members turned to him involuntarily. Shifeng's words were a siren song. They couldn't help getting ensnared. Lionheart's breathing also quickened at Shifeng's words as he sought confirmation. "Brother Black Flame, is what you said true?" "Of course, but it won't be cheap," Shifeng said, nodding. In reality, part of the reason he had taken the Crimson Dragon flying ship out was to display it to Skyflare's members and lure the adventurer team into buying it. As soon as Shifeng finished speaking, Lionheart answered with no hesitation whatsoever. "Brother Black Flame, please state your price. So long as you are willing to sell this Crimson Dragon flying ship, Skyflare will do everything it can to buy it." Chapter 2788, Illusory Flames. Chapter 2788, Illusory Flames. While Lionheart agreed enthusiastically to Shifeng's offer, Yu Luo looked at Shifeng in surprise. She never thought that Shifeng would actually be willing to sell the Crimson Dragon flying ship. In the modern God's domain, Zero Wing was the sole guild to own flying ships. Many superpowers wished to purchase one from Zero Wing, yet Zero Wing had rejected all offers. Of course, everyone could also understand that decision. After all, Zero Wing could reap more advantages by monopolizing the flying ship than selling it. If news got out that Shifeng was selling a Crimson Dragon flying ship to the Skyflare adventurer team, the various superpowers operating in the modern era would definitely die of envy. However, what Yu Luo wasn't aware of was that Shifeng had decided to sell Skyflare a flying ship because matters of the ancient era wouldn't influence the modern era. It was challenging for players of the modern era to visit the ancient era. And even if they managed to travel to the ancient era by luck, they wouldn't be able to stay for long. The number of players that could travel to the ancient era wouldn't be significant, either. Likewise, the ancient era's players would have a tough time visiting the modern era. It was unlikely for the two worlds to have any major interaction with each other at this point. To put it simply, even if he sold a Crimson Dragon flying ship to the Skyflare adventurer team, Skyflare wouldn't affect Zero Wing's advantages in the modern era. Hence, he could trade some precious items to Skyflare without worry. Moreover, if Skyflare grew stronger in the ancient era, the adventurer team would also have an easier time collecting the ancient era's various resources for him. After all, he had neither the time nor the strength to establish his own force in the ancient era. In that case, relying on the local powers to secure resources was the next best option. Most importantly, the fewer the people that knew of the secret between the two worlds, the better. Otherwise, be it in the ancient God's domain or modern God's domain, he shouldn't think of living a peaceful life. "Commander Lionheart, if you wish to purchase the flying ship, it will cost you 10,000 Titan silver ingots, 1,000 magic elven stones, and 1,007 luminaries crystals," Shifeng stated his price directly. For the time being, he could already secure more than enough magic crystals through exchanging the crystals of souls and soul water. Compared to magic crystals, he prioritized obtaining materials that were rare in the modern God's domain and 7 luminaries crystals. Moreover, trying to obtain these rare materials with the crystal of souls and soul water would be difficult since crystals of souls and soul water were non-essentials. After all, They merely increased players' chances of completing their Tier 4 promotion quest by a little. More precisely, the Crystal of Souls and Soul Water merely helped players complete their Tier 4 promotion quests ahead of time. In the case of players who never had a chance to complete their Tier 4 promotion quest to begin with, the items would be useless. This point was something anyone who had used the two items would know. Hence, while the various powers could accept using magic crystals, which were abundant, to exchange for crystals of souls and soul water, they would think twice if the requested currency was a strategic or rare material. After all, collecting these materials wasn't an easy task, and they were necessary for many applications. These materials basically served as the foundation of the various powers. That much. Lionheart frowned automatically when he heard Shifeng's price. Although he had known that the Crimson Dragon flying ship wouldn't be cheap, he never expected such a steep price. Titan silver and magic elven stone were precious resources essential to the construction of many buildings and the production of important items. As for the 7 luminaries crystal, it was something all players and powers coveted. The Skyflare adventurer team had gone to great lengths and sacrificed many experts to occupy a small area that generated 7 luminaries crystals. Moreover, Skyflare still had to station over 1,000 Tier 3 experts there to guard the area at all times. Meanwhile, the price of 1,007 luminaries crystals would basically zero out Skyflare's stockpile. Upon seeing Lionheart's reaction, Shifeng said unhurriedly, "Of course, this is only the first option, Commander Lionheart. You can also consider going with the second option, which is to let me invest in Skyflare and give me 5% of Skyflare's income in the future." 5%. Lionheart pondered Shifeng's offer carefully. Honestly speaking, 5% of the current Skyflare adventurer team's income wasn't a significant amount. However, the story would change when Skyflare grew stronger. In the long run, the income Skyflare lost would definitely far exceed the price of Shifeng's first offer. "Commander, my suggestion is to go with the first option," Windchaser whispered as he looked at Lionheart agonizing over Shifeng's offer. "Although we'll be broke for some time after buying the flying ship, Skyflare's value will far exceed those resources in the future." Now that Skyflare already had 5 Tier 4 players, its future was promising. Giving away part of its income for just one flying ship was unnecessary. The other Skyflare executives also looked toward Lionheart, their eyes clearly conveying agreement with Windchaser. Taking a deep breath, Lionheart looked at Shifeng and said, "Brother Black Flame, I chose the first trading option. Once this operation is over, we can conduct the transaction in Meteorite City. However, the amount of materials you need is too significant. While we have enough 7 luminaries crystals, I can't say the same for the Titan silver and magic elven stones. I don't think we can meet your demands even if we take out Meteorite City's stockpile. We can, at most, fulfill 50% of your required amount. May I know if we can make up for the remaining amount using 100 top-tier epic weapons and equipment?" This, after giving the matter some thought, Shifeng said, "That's fine as well, but I will accept only level 150 epic weapons and equipment. In Meteorite City, the total value of 5,000 Titan silver ingots and 500 magic elven stones was equivalent to 80 top-tier epic weapons and equipment, at most. Moreover, acquiring so many top-tier epic weapons and equipment wouldn't necessarily be possible. After all, while many NPC merchants in the ancient gods' domain sold epic weapons and equipment, there was still a limit. This was especially true for top-tier epic weapons and equipment. Their rarity in the ancient era was not the slightest bit lower than in the modern era. Often, acquiring these items meant raiding mythic bosses and even superior mythic bosses. Bosses of such caliber were incredibly limited, and one would be fortunate to find even 20 of such bosses within Meteorite City's vicinity each week. Moreover, even if Skyflare now had many Tier 4 experts, raiding superior mythic bosses still carried great risks. Lionheart's offer of 100 top-tier epic weapons and equipment to make up for the difference was definitely favorable for Shifeng. Shifeng understood Lionheart's reason for doing so. In fact, if he were in Lionheart's shoes, he would go with such an option too. After all, the risks that came with giving away Skyflare's shares were massive. However, Shifeng didn't really mind Lionheart's choice, either, since his initial goal was to obtain a large amount of Titan silver, magic elven stones, and 7 luminaries crystals. The second option wasn't actually a good option for him. After all, the number of times he could enter the ancient god's domain was limited. For Zero Wing, which was currently in dire need of resources, such a long-term investment wasn't desirable. This outcome was undoubtedly the best for Shifeng. Moreover, exchanging half of the required Titan silver and magic elven stones into top-tier epic weapons and equipment was also a good deal for him. After all, the current Zero Wing hardly had any level 150 epic weapons and equipment. With these top-tier epic weapons and equipment, Zero Wing's executives would also have an easier time completing their Tier 4 promotion quests. That won't be a problem. Lionheart nodded. Simultaneously, he revealed a bitter smile. For the sake of purchasing 1 Crimson Dragon flying ship, he had basically emptied out Skyflare's coffers. After this transaction, Skyflare would severely lack for not only magic crystals and various strategic resources but also weapons and equipment. However, despite knowing this, all of Skyflare's executives revealed ecstatic expressions on their faces. They also continuously admired and inspected the Crimson Dragon flying ship. It was as if they could already imagine the beautiful future that awaited Skyflare once they obtained the flying ship. The Crimson Dragon flying ship flew for a dozen hours or so. After passing through numerous large maps, it finally arrived at a dusky land. Despite flames burning everywhere, this land was heavily forested. As soon as everyone entered this map, they immediately felt their stamina and concentration depleting. In response, Crimson Billow drank a fire resistance potion. However, she still sensed her stamina and concentration decreasing gradually and couldn't help feeling a little surprised. Fire resistance has no effect on the flames here. At this rate, I'm afraid we'll run out of stamina and die if we stay here for more than a dozen hours. Normally, an increase in a person's fire resistance would allow them to counter all debuffs from fire. However, her increased fire resistance was actually useless here. This situation was simply unprecedented. B greater than EB. It seems that we'll have to move quickly. While sensing the changes in his own body, Wind Chaser said, otherwise, we'll probably be annihilated before we can kill that Tier 4 infant dragon. Nodding, Shifeng promptly commanded, all Tier 3s will remain on the flying ship, while Tier 4s spread out and search for the infant dragon. Once you locate the infant dragon, report back immediately. As soon as Shifeng finished speaking, Skyflare's 5 Tier 4 players promptly floated up, ready to start looking for the Tier 4 infant dragon. Meanwhile, Lifeless Thorn, Solitary 9, and Yu Luo, who had been concealing their auras with their black cloaks all this time, also gradually rose into the air, the sight attracting the attention of Skyflare's executives. They're Tier 4s too? Crimson Billow was shocked as she looked at Lifeless Thorn's group of 3. Although Shifeng had already surprised her plenty of times, she still found it astonishing that the 3 players who had tagged along with Shifeng were also Tier 4 players. After all, Tier 4 players were still rare in the entire God's domain. On average, a main city would only have 1 or 2 Tier 4 players. Yet, it was revealed that not only Shifeng but even the people following him were Tier 4 players. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Since when were Tier 4 players as common as cabbages? It seems Black Flame has far more secrets than we think. Fortunately, we chose to partner with him. I really don't want to imagine what would have happened had we chosen to make an enemy out of him, Wind Chaser said, smiling bitterly. Yu Luo aside, Lifeless Thorn and Solitary 9 were part of the group that entered Meteorite City with Shifeng. Now that 3 out of the group of 5 were confirmed to be Tier 4 players, it wouldn't be strange that the other 2 players were hidden Tier 4s as well. To think that we were actually planning to use force if negotiations failed. In retrospect, Wind Chaser found their thoughts laughable. Subsequently, after Shifeng's group of 9 searched for about half an hour, Crimson Billow's voice suddenly appeared in the team chat. I found the infant dragon. It's resting inside a cave in the southwest valley. Chapter 2789, Dragon's Might. Chapter 2789, Dragon's Might. In a cave on the southwestern side of the Ghostfire Hills. After Crimson Billow sent the infant dragon's coordinates, Shifeng had quickly gathered everyone. Now, All 128 members of the team were sneaking deeper into the cave. The flames seemed to be getting stronger and stronger, Yuluo said worriedly when she sensed her stamina and concentration depleting at a quicker rate. Moreover, the burning sensation is also growing stronger, the deeper we go. At this rate, I'm afraid the burning sensation will grow so strong that we won't be able to focus during the battle. Indeed. The burning sensation here is getting worse. Wind Chaser nodded in agreement. Under this burning sensation, I'm afraid ordinary refinement realm experts won't be able to exhibit combat standards at the refinement realm. Previously, the illusory flames merely ate at his stamina and concentration. However, he now felt as if his whole body was scorching. Although the pain was subtle, it would still impact the performance of people with weak minds. Combat techniques, skills, and spells required precision control. Even a slight deviation could result in a massive difference in the combat power one could exhibit. After observing the environment, Lionheart suggested to Shafong, Brother Black Flame, "This cave is indeed extraordinary. I think our best option is to take the fight out of the cave. Otherwise, we'll have difficulty exerting our strength." "I'm afraid that won't do." Shaking his head, Shafong said with certainty, "We must finish the infant dragon in this cave. Moreover, this is most likely our only chance. Outside this cave, we'll have trouble even touching the infant dragon." Dragons were the rulers of the sky. On paper, fighting the infant dragon outside the cave might seem to be to their team's advantage. However, doing so would actually place their team at a disadvantage. This was especially true for the team's Tier 3 players. Without the help of special skills, Tier 3 players couldn't fly by themselves. Hence, if they fought the infant dragon outside, the team's Tier 3 members would get sidelined. As for utilizing the Crimson Dragon flying ship to fight the infant dragon, that was simply a joke. Against a Tier 4 infant dragon, even an advanced flying ship wouldn't last more than 3 or 4 hits. In fact, it wouldn't be strange if the Crimson Dragon flying ship fell after just one attack. After all, the flying ship was merely capable of withstanding the attacks of ordinary Tier 4 mythic monsters. Its defenses would crumble instantly before a Tier 5 attack. Shortly afterward, Shafong and the others came across Crimson Billow, hiding underneath a rock. At present, though, Crimson Billow had a wilted expression on her face. "What happened?" Lionheart asked strangely when he saw Crimson Billow's condition. "It's nothing." Shaking her head, Crimson Billow smiled bitterly and said, "I'm just wondering whether we can really win against that infant dragon. Although it is an infant dragon, our team isn't a pushover, either. How would we know we can't win if we don't give it a try?" Bloodblade said confidently as he looked at Crimson Billow's defeated expression. "Don't forget that we have 9 Tier 4 players this time. That infant dragon is also only at Tier 4. However, after Bloodblade finished speaking, the cavern at the end of the road appeared in front of everyone. And a creature with a pale golden body over 100 meters long entered their sight. Infant golden dragon, mythic, level 140 HP 112 billion. How is this possible? Everyone gasped involuntarily when they saw the infant dragon statistics. Even Lifeless Thorn and Solitary 9, who had seen a half-step Demon King before, were astonished. The infant golden dragon's stifling aura aside, just its HP of 112 billion was already plenty mind-boggling. With 112 billion HP, the infant dragon would recover 24 billion HP every 5 seconds, or roughly 400 million HP every second. Even assuming each of their Tier 4 players could cause 50 million damage per second, after excluding the 2 Tier 4 healers, they could deal only around 350 million damage per second with the remaining 7 Tier 4 players. Moreover, this was all under the premise that the infant dragon didn't possess a powerful defense and wouldn't put up any resistance. Not to mention, the infant dragon before them was part of the Golden Dragon tribe. Its bloodline was of a much higher purity than ordinary dragons. Among the dragon race, the Golden Dragon's bloodline was second only to divine dragons. It's no wonder they say dragons are invincible among existences of the same tier. With such HP, even if we can survive this infant dragon's attacks, I doubt we can actually kill it. Wind Chaser couldn't help feeling shaken. Although HP wasn't everything, it could still provide an intuitive gauge of an existence's general strength. With how much HP the infant dragon possessed, it was easy to imagine how terrifying its basic attributes were. They were definitely at least 2 or 3 times higher than those of the average superior mythic monster of the same level. What did that mean? With an attack from a superior mythic monster of the same level, a Tier 4 player would still receive significant damage even if they merely defended themselves. However, if a Tier 4 player tried defending against one of the infant golden dragon's attacks, they would be fortunate to retain a scrap of HP to keep themselves alive. If they were unlucky, they would be one-shotted. In other words, if their team wished to fight the infant golden dragon, they couldn't allow even a graze from it. Otherwise, lives would be lost. At this moment, Lionheart and the other Skyflare executives finally understood why Shifeng didn't assign healers to any of the Tier 3 combat squadrons. After all, Tier 3 players would be no different from ants in the upcoming battle. They were insignificant existences that would disappear upon coming into contact with even the slightest shockwave. Hence, there was naturally no need to assign healers to them. An infant golden dragon? Shifeng also smiled bitterly when he saw the mountain-like dragon before him. No wonder this quest was evaluated at the inferior mythic rank. This Tier 4 infant golden dragon's combat power reached the Tier 5 intermediate rank. Even Froboro in his heyday wouldn't be a match for this infant dragon. In other words, the infant dragon simply wasn't an existence Tier 4 players could hope to confront. Possibly, only Tier 4 experts wielding legendary weapons and geared in legendary equipment could hope to defeat the infant golden dragon. Otherwise, the best option for players coming across this infant dragon was to obey their instincts and flee immediately. Brother Black Flame. At this time, Lionheart couldn't help but look at Shifeng and shake his head. Although I don't want to say it, I'm afraid there really is no hope of killing this infant golden dragon. After seeing the infant golden dragon for himself, he finally understood that the records in books weren't entirely trustworthy. After all, the infant dragon before him was many times more terrifying than what was described in the library books he read. It simply wasn't an existence Tier 4 players could hope to fight. At the very least, it is absolutely impossible for their present selves. Most likely, only Tier 4 NPCs would have a glimmer of hope. No, that's not necessarily true, Shifeng said, shaking his head. A hint of determination appearing in his eyes, he continued, we're not exactly out of options. It's just that we'll need to gamble. Killing this Tier 4 infant golden dragon was imperative. However, it wasn't just for the sake of completing his inferior mythic quest, but because he couldn't continue staying in the ancient god's domain. After all, his initial goal in visiting the Earthfall secret land was simply to acquire the necessary resources for constructing the small mobile fortress. Now that he had achieved his goal, he couldn't remain here, as there were still many things he needed to attend to in the modern god's domain. Meanwhile, killing the infant dragon before him was his best chance to attract the world's attention and get the world to banish him from the ancient god's domain. Gamble? Lionheart was slightly surprised by Shifeng's words. He simply couldn't see how they could possibly defeat the infant dragon before them. I will start chanting an incantation in a moment, and it will most likely cause quite a commotion. So, I will need you to erect a magic barrier now to prevent the infant dragon from noticing it, Shifeng said, taking a deep breath. As for the subsequent battle, I will need you, Commander Lionheart, to act as support. Both you Luo and Fated Fern will be tasked with healing you. 9. You'll protect the healer squadron. As for the healer squadron, use everything you have to heal my summoned creature. Do not stop for even a moment. Summoned creature? Lionheart and the others were confused by Shifeng's words. They found it hard to imagine that any summoned creature could stop the infant golden dragon for even a moment. Despite their doubts, everyone still obeyed Shifeng's commands. The next moment, over 100 people each took out a magic array scroll from their bags and instantly erected a barrier to isolate the tunnel from the cavern. With this magic barrier present, the infant golden dragon wouldn't detect anything they did inside the barrier even if it was awake right now. Brother Black Flame, everything is ready. You can begin whenever you want, Lionheart said. Looking at the advanced magic array, he couldn't help feeling a little heartache. However, To avoid disturbing the infant golden dragon, they had no choice but to use it. Meanwhile, after Shifeng personally verified that everything was set up correctly, he took out the Bible of Darkness and began chanting an incantation. Originally, he had not planned to use the Bible of Darkness. After all, the cost of using it at Tier 4 was far too great. He estimated that after a few more uses, his soul would get devoured by the power of darkness. However, if he wished to slay the infant golden dragon now, he could only take the risk. Immediately after Shifeng began chanting, the mana inside the barrier gave off a bone-chilling sensation, the complete opposite of the burning sensation it gave off previously. Before anyone could react to the change, the barrier's interior suddenly went dark. Everyone could feel endless loneliness, coldness, and despair coming from the darkness around them. Standing in this dark environment didn't feel the slightest bit better than standing in the infant dragon's presence. As Shifeng continued incanting, the infant golden dragon slumbering outside the barrier suddenly opened its eyes as if startled awake. Its massive eyes then looked directly at the barrier-enveloped tunnel vigilantly. How is this possible? Fated Fern, who was hosting the magic barrier, was stunned by this development. The advanced magic array they used, Spatial Wall, could thoroughly isolate an area from the outside world. Even if a large explosion went off inside the barrier, nobody in the outside world should be able to notice it. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Nonetheless, the infant dragon had clearly noticed them. What a despicable dark energy. Looking at the empty tunnel before it, the infant golden dragon bellowed, "It seems you humans have fallen as well. To think you would actually come seeking death together with a demon." The infant dragon's bellow instantly extinguished the advanced magic barrier like a storm blowing out a candle. Simultaneously, the figures of Shifeng and the others appeared before the infant dragon. "Brother Black Flame." Seeing that the infant dragon had already stood up, Lionheart raised his shield anxiously. He then sent a sidelong glance at Shifeng and asked, "Are you still not done?" The power of the dragon before them far exceeded his expectations. Normally, even mythic monsters couldn't destroy the spatial wall so easily, yet the infant dragon had accomplished this feat with just one roar. He simply didn't dare imagine how powerful an actual attack from the infant dragon would be. "I'm done. I made it just in time," Shifeng said, a smile appearing on his pale face. As soon as Shifeng finished speaking, a dark void appeared in the cavern's ceiling. A stone door even larger than the infant golden dragon then fell out of this void. Before the players and infant dragon could react to this turn of events, the stone door gradually opened. Chapter 2790, Heaven-Defying Battle. Chapter 2790, Heaven-Defying Battle. The demon gate inside the cavern opened. However, when the door was only partly open, a cold voice suddenly came from beyond it. Shifeng's group and the awakened infant golden dragon shuddered involuntarily upon hearing this voice. A little golden lizard and a heaven-blessed individual. "Wait, no, you're not an existence of this world. Interesting. How interesting. Oh, the Bible of Darkness is actually damaged. Wonderful. This is truly wonderful." The demonic words that came out of the door echoed in everyone's mind. Although the voice spoke in a calm tone, the aura escaping the door paralyzed everyone momentarily. The infant golden dragon glared at the door in fear. "A Tier 5 Demon King?" Shifeng was astonished when he sensed the frightening aura from the demon gate. According to his expectations, he would already be fortunate if he could summon even a demon prince. After all, the Bible of Darkness had yet to reach its perfect state. However, the existence behind the demon gate was undoubtedly much stronger than a demon prince. In fact, none of the Tier 5 existences he had come across thus far had exuded such a powerful aura. "This book isn't suitable for a little guy like you. Give it to me. Only if it is in my hands can I truly descend onto this land." At the Demon King's words, Shifeng suddenly sensed his control over the Bible of Darkness waning, and the Bible actually started flying toward the demon gate. Seeing this, Shifeng couldn't help being shocked. He never thought that a demon could resist and manipulate the Bible of Darkness's power. Hurriedly, he used all his strength to wrestle back control over the Bible of Darkness. "Stop wasting your energy, little fellow. I will be taking this damaged Bible of darkness. However, you can also rest assured. Once my clan and I thoroughly descend upon this world, I will make sure to spare you." At these words, the Bible of darkness struggled even harder to break free from Shifeng's grasp. In fact, his connection with the Bible of darkness was even severed completely, and the only thing he could do now was hold on to the book with brute force. "Despicable human, you actually dared summon that thing here," the infant golden dragon bellowed. Evidently, it had figured out the identity of the existence beyond the demon gate. "I will not let you succeed. Die." After letting out a roar, the infant dragon suddenly widened its mouth. Immediately afterward, a threefold magic array took shape before it. "Not good. It's using dragon breath. Everyone, dodge quickly," Shifeng shouted, surprised by the infant dragon's actions. A Tier 4 dragon breath would undoubtedly carry power at the Tier 5 intermediate rank standard. Let alone Tier 3 players, even Tier 4 players would die if they faced it. The only way they could survive this attack was to dodge it. However, the infant golden dragon was simply too fast. Before anyone could react, the threefold magic array had already taken shape. The next moment, a destructive energy ball shot out of the infant dragon's mouth, the energy ball's speed and size making it impossible for anyone to avoid in time. Everyone could only watch as the dragon breath approached them. "It's over." Lionheart reflexively closed his eyes when he saw the approaching dragon breath that destroyed everything in its path. As for everyone else, they also revealed looks of despair and bitter smiles. Previously, they thought that they still stood a chance against the infant golden dragon, albeit a small chance. However, after seeing the destructive power the dragon breath carried, they realized that any form of resistance would be meaningless. The only thing they could do was wait for death. However, just when the dragon breath was about to reach Shifeng and the others, that cold voice came from the half-opened demon gate again. "A little lizard thinks it can stop my descent." An illusory hand suddenly appeared out of thin air before Shifeng's team and caught the approaching energy ball. The giant hand then squeezed the energy ball, shattering it into countless dispersing particles of light. How is this possible? Everyone was thunderstruck by this scene. The dragon breath that carried such devastating power had actually been stopped so easily. They couldn't even begin to imagine how powerful the demon behind the demon gate was. However, despite this sudden turn of events, Shifeng's complexion did not improve. On the contrary, it even turned gloomier instead. Despite being only halfway summoned, the summoned Demon King could already exert enough strength to block a Tier 4 dragon breath casually. The Demon King's strength was definitely at the Tier 5 peak rank. This meant that the existence beyond the Demon Gate wasn't just an ordinary Tier 5 Demon King. It was a Tier 5 Great Demon King. If Shifeng allowed a Great Demon King to descend onto God's domain, even if it was the ancient God's domain, it would still spell disaster for the entire continent. However, before Shifeng and the others could recover from their surprise, the infant golden dragon suddenly appeared above them. At this time, golden runes covered its body, and the aura it exuded was significantly stronger than before. It can still become stronger. When Shifeng looked at the infant golden dragon in the air, he was genuinely shocked for the first time in a long while. After all, the infant golden dragon was much stronger than he expected. Comparable to Tier 5 existences? What a joke. The aura and power the infant golden dragon currently displayed had already more than doubled. It was definitely much stronger than ordinary Tier 5 existences. In fact, he doubted he could survive one attack from it even if he activated his berserk skill. Despicable demon, you can't use your full strength while behind that door. I refuse to believe you can keep blocking my attacks. So long as your summoner dies, you will have to remain in that endless abyss forever. The infant golden dragon glared at the demon gate, a hint of disdain and mockery in its eyes. It then opened its mouth and launched another dragon breath. This dragon breath was much more terrifying than before. As soon as the infant dragon inhaled, Shifeng and the others sensed the mana within the cavern disappear completely. In addition, the Tier 3 players even had their mana rapidly sucked from their bodies. And although the Tier 4 players managed to prevent their mana from getting plundered, their ability to manipulate mana was greatly hindered. Now, they couldn't even exhibit half of their usual combat power. This is that infant dragon's true strength. Bloodblade fell into despair as he looked at the massive figure in the air. Seeing it now, he couldn't help but find their previous notion of challenging the Tier 4 infant dragon laughable. The infant golden dragon was much stronger than what its HP portrayed. It simply wasn't an existence Tier 4 players could hope to challenge. This moment drove home to Shifeng why the quest he received was of the inferior mythic rank. He also understood why humans capable of slaying dragons were highly praised in God's domain. It would already be a miracle if a human could fight a dragon of the same tier and level to a standstill, let alone kill one. This was especially true for dragons that had reached Tier 4 or above. It wouldn't even be an exaggeration to refer to such a feat as a myth. Roar. Accompanied by a deafening roar, a dazzling energy sphere carrying devastating power descended toward the team. Little lizard, you have truly angered me now. The infant golden dragon's efforts to prevent the great demon king beyond the demon gate from descending enraged him. Suddenly, boundless power of darkness flooded out of the demon gate. A gigantic hand 5 times larger than the one before emerged from the ground. The hand was so massive that the infant dragon looked like a toy in comparison. Boom! Not only did the gigantic hand shatter the dragon breath instantly, but it even grabbed the infant dragon. And despite the infant dragon struggling desperately to break free, the giant hand remained unfazed as it smashed the infant dragon into the ground. Boom! A crater with a radius of 1,000 yards and a depth of 100 meters appeared on the cavern floor. Apart from the Tier 4 players and the Tier 3 healers, who had consumed Master Steel potions, the other players in the cavern were instantly killed by the resulting shockwave. Although Shifeng and the Tier 4 players remained alive, they had lost over 2/3 of their HPs. As for the surviving healers, their HPs had also fallen to a critical level. They had very nearly lost their lives. Meanwhile, after the dust in the vast cavern dissipated, the giant hand was nowhere in sight. The only thing in the crater was the infant golden dragon. Presently, however, the infant dragon had both its wings broken, with blood flowing out from all over its body. Its life aura had also weakened significantly, and its HP had even fallen to just 63%. Given the infant dragon's current state, it was evident that the Great Demon King's attack had heavily injured it. How strong! So, this is the strength of a Tier 5 Great Demon King? Shifeng was dumbfounded by this outcome. The infant golden dragon had put its all into the last attack, and the attack's power had definitely reached the Tier 5 advanced rank standard. Yet, it still suffered a brutal beating. The difference in strength between the infant dragon and Great Demon King was clear for all to see. In fact, if not for the demon gate severely dampening the Great Demon King's strength, the infant dragon would have most likely died from that one attack. Meanwhile, after the Great Demon King executed this attack, his control over the Bible of Darkness had also weakened significantly. At the very least, Shifeng could now sense a connection between him and the Bible of Darkness. Shifeng hurriedly cancelled the summoning. Previously, due to the severance of his connection with the Bible of Darkness, he couldn't stop the summoning even if he wanted to. However, now that he had recovered a small portion of control over the Bible of Darkness, he could cancel the summoning. As for the cost of forcibly cancelling the summoning, he couldn't care less about it right now. After all, if he allowed a Tier 5 Great Demon King to descend onto the continent, only death awaited him. Moreover, the cost of this death wouldn't just be a loss of 1 or 2 levels. Instead, his body might very well end up a puppet of the Great Demon King, and he would have no choice but to retrain a new account. Hence, he absolutely couldn't let the Great Demon King exit the Demon Gate, even if doing so would leave himself in a weakened state. You damned heaven-blessed individual. I will make you pay a heavy price the next time we meet. Upon seeing the Demon Gate closing, the Great Demon King bellowed angrily and repeatedly attacked the door, causing it to tremble violently. Fortunately, the Demon Gate was sufficiently powerful. No matter how much the Great Demon King assailed it, the Demon Gate continued closing at a steady pace. Finally, 20 seconds later, the Demon Gate closed and disappeared from this space, leaving behind only the heavily injured infant golden dragon and Shifeng's team in the cavern. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU Brother Blackflame, what should we do now? Lionheart asked in an uncertain voice after seeing the demon gate disappear. He didn't know whether they should flee or try to kill the infant golden dragon while it was heavily injured. Although the infant dragon was significantly weaker than before, it was still much stronger than superior mythic monsters of the same level. Is there even a need to ask? Looking at the infant dragon that was struggling to stand up, Shifeng said in a determined tone, "Now is our only chance to slay this infant dragon. With our strength, we can't defeat it in its peak state. Don't tell me you're willing to miss out on such an opportunity, Commander Lionheart." At Shifeng's words, Lifeless Thorn and Solitary 9 nodded in agreement. If the infant golden dragon wasn't heavily injured, killing it with their present strength was nigh impossible. Only Tier 5 players could possibly go up against it. I guess you're right. As Lionheart looked at the infant golden dragon, a trace of determination also appeared in his eyes. He then said, "Since that's the case, let's kill it before it recovers." After saying so, Lionheart raised his shield and led the charge against the infant golden dragon, with all the other Tier 4s except for Shifeng following close at his heels. Chapter 2791, Infant Golden Dragon's Fall. Chapter 2791, Infant Golden Dragons Fall. Insignificant humans. Do you think you can insult me just because I am heavily injured? When the infant golden dragon saw Lionheart and the other Tier 45 charging toward it, anger flared in its amber pupils, and it let loose a deafening roar. A shockwave immediately spread from the infant dragon to its surroundings. Boom! 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 A series of collisions echoed throughout the cavern as Lionheart and the others got hit by the shockwave. Aside from Lionheart and Solitary 9, everyone else on the team went flying back several dozen meters, a stinging pain washing through their bodies. They also lost over 2 million HP from the attack. Lifeless Thorn and the others, who only had around 6 million HP, had basically lost 1/3 of their HPs to the shockwave. It's still so strong even after getting injured. Everyone gasped when they saw their own HP bar. The infant golden dragon was clearly extremely weakened right now, yet it still managed to inflict so much damage with only its roar. Its strength was simply terrifying. At this time, even Shifeng was stunned by this situation. In addition to its heavy injuries, the infant dragon was also suffering from the heavenly dragon's breath suppression. Otherwise, everyone would have most likely lost over half of their HP from the shockwave. Tier 3 healers, keep up. Restore the damage dealer's HP with everything you've got. Don't stop even for a moment. Shifeng, who was currently incapacitated due to the backlash from forcibly cancelling the demon summoning, hurriedly issued commands across the distance. You Luo and Fated Fern, you two prioritize healing Lionheart and 9. Make sure their HPs are full at all times. At Shifeng's command, Fated Fern, a Tier 4 oracle, swung her staff and doublecast 2 Tier 3 curses. Tier 3 Defensive Curse, Contract Barrier. Tier 3 Strengthening Curse, Heavenly God's Prayer. Immediately, a translucent barrier formed around the bodies of Lionheart and Solitary 9. Simultaneously, divine runes appeared on the bodies of everyone on the team, doubling everyone's resistances and defense and increasing everyone's physique by 20% for 20 minutes. She even has a Tier 3 AoE Strengthening Curse? Shifeng was surprised as he looked at Fated Fern strengthening spells were incredibly rare in God's domain. In fact, they were 10 times rarer than ordinary curses of the same tier. This was especially true for AoE strengthening spells. The value of such a spell was practically equivalent to a fragmented legendary item. In his previous life, any player who wielded strengthening spells would receive the VIP treatment from the various superpowers. This was because, unlike berserk skills, strengthening spells had short cooldowns and long durations. An AoE strengthening spell could elevate a team's combat power to a whole other level. In the past, one of the reasons Violet Cloud was recognized as one of the 10 great cleric gods was her possession of many AoE strengthening spells. This prompted the various superpowers to desperately seek her. As far as Shifeng knew, nobody in the modern god's domain had gained a strengthening spell even now. Yet, not only did Fated Fern possess a strengthening spell, but it was even of the AoE variety. How could he not be surprised by this situation? Meanwhile, after fated Fern cast Heavenly God's Prayer, the team's overall combat power evidently rose by a slight margin. Good. Let's continue. After seeing the barrier protecting his body, Lionheart charged forward once more. This time, the infant dragon no longer attacked with its roar. Instead, it swept its tail at the approaching players. However, despite seeing the tail that shattered even space itself bearing down on him, Lionheart did not back away. Instead, he raised his shield and stood his ground. He then activated the Tier 3 defensive skill, Blood Cloud. A crimson barrier appeared before his body, one capable of absorbing 6 attacks. Although the barrier could fully nullify only attacks at the Tier 4 standard and below, it could still diminish the damage of Tier 5 attacks. Boom! The blood cloud instantly exploded upon coming into contact with the infant dragon's tail. However, thanks to the blood cloud dampening the blow, Lionheart only stumbled 2 steps backward and lost a little over 6 million HP. For Lionheart, who had already reached level 137 and possessed 17.2 million HP, this amount of damage was still tolerable. Upon seeing that Lionheart could take on the infant dragon's attacks, everyone else on the team breathed out a sigh of relief and began assaulting the infant dragon. Bloodblade used his Tier 4 legacy skill Storm Dance. Lifeless Thorn also used his Tier 4 legacy skill Lightning Serpent. Tier 4 skills and spells bombarded the infant dragon's body one after another, every one of them dealing over 50 million damage, with some even doing over 100 million critical damage. However, compared to the infant dragon's remaining 60 billion HP, this amount of damage appeared minuscule. Is the damage still not enough? Shifeng frowned when he saw the result of the frenzied barrage. Apart from Lionheart, the 5 other Tier 4 players fighting were currently attacking the infant dragon with everything they had. Yet, the damage they caused just barely exceeded the infant dragon's battle recovery. Moreover, this was with the infant dragon's battle recovery halved due to its heavy injuries. The Tier 3 healers healing from a distance also couldn't help growing anxious in this situation. At this rate, their team would need more than an hour to finish the battle. Meanwhile, 1 hour was definitely more than enough for the infant golden dragon to recover from its injuries. If that happened, they would be doomed. Lionheart and the others were also aware of the situation. However, this was already the best they could do. Although they could activate their berserk skills to raise their damage output temporarily, doing so would be meaningless and would prompt the infant dragon to enter its berserk phase earlier. At that time, without their berserk skills, they would be utterly incapable of defending against the infant dragon's attacks. Do any of you have combat resurrection? Shifeng asked the 12 Tier 3 healers behind him. In the ancient god's domain, ordinary resurrection methods couldn't resurrect players on the spot. One special type of resurrection method could. However, the player resurrected through this method would suffer a higher death penalty. I do. 8 of the Tier 3 healers responded to Shifeng's question. Good. Go and resurrect the 8 players with the highest strength. Shifeng breathed out a sigh of relief when he saw how many responses he received. The next moment, the 8 healers with combat resurrection resurrected 8 of Skyflur's fallen members. Take these spears and divide them among yourselves. After looking at the 8 resurrected players, Shifeng took out the 600+ thunder spears stored in his bag. Drink a master strength potion and activate your berserk skills. Afterward, use everything you have to throw these spears at the infant dragon. It's best if you can use up all these spears before your berserk skills run out. Don't hold back. Yes, sir. The 8 players nodded, fully understanding Shifeng's intentions. As Tier 3 melee players, they couldn't even be considered cannon fodder in front of the Tier 4 infant dragon. After all, if they tried moving up close to the dragon, they would instantly die to any random roar. The only way they could contribute to the raid was by relying on external items. Only then would they have a chance of dealing damage to the infant dragon. The 8 players consumed the master strength potions they had prepared beforehand, which increased their strength attribute by 70% for 3 minutes. They then activated their respective berserk skills, further improving their basic attributes. In terms of strength, the 8 of them could already rival mythic monsters of the same level. After seeing the infant dragon swing its tail, exposing its back, Shifeng ordered, "Attack. Aim at the dragon's injuries or the reverse scale on its back." At Shifeng's command, the 8 melee players promptly threw the thunder spears they held with all their might. Whoosh! 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 The next moment, 8 lightning arcs cut through space and landed on the infant dragon's injuries and reverse scale. Roar! The infant dragon roared in pain at the attacks. Simultaneously, damages exceeding 50 million appeared above its head one after another. There was even one critical hit that dealt over 130 million damage. The 8 melee players' attacks were not the slightest bit weaker than those of Lifeless Thorn and the other Tier 4 combatants, only the frequency of their attacks was slightly inferior. Good. Next volley. Seeing that the attacks were highly effective, Shifeng promptly called for another attack. In response, the 8 melee players each took out another thunder spear and hurled the weapons at the infant dragon. When the attacks connected, the infant dragon's HP bar finally shrank, albeit slightly. As expected of the commander, "We have a chance now." Solitary 9 couldn't help growing excited when he saw the rate of the infant dragon's HP decrease accelerating. Crimson Billow, who was frantically attacking the infant dragon, looked toward Shifeng in surprise despite herself. He still has a trump card. She never thought that Shifeng could actually add 8 more Tier 4 combatants to the fight. Now, with their damage output, killing the infant dragon within a short period was entirely possible. The infant golden dragon's HP continuously decreased over time. 60%, 40%, 30%. The speed at which the infant dragon lost HP was nothing like before. Only, in exchange for this boost in DPS, the supply of thunder spears declined rapidly. In just 2 minutes, the 8 Tier 3 players had already used up more than 400 thunder spears. "Everyone, be careful. It's going berserk," Shifeng warned when he saw that the infant dragon's HP bar had fallen to a critical level. As soon as Shifeng finished speaking, the infant dragon suddenly let out an angry roar. Simultaneously, the dragon's body gave off a dazzling, golden glow, and its eyes turned bloodshot. It had evidently entered a berserk state. "All right. Since Brother Blackflame has let us see his cards, let's show him ours as well." Glancing at Fated Fern, Lionheart shouted, "Fern, it's your turn now. Leave it to me." Fated Fern smiled. She then took out the Tier 5 sealing crystal from her bag and began chanting an incantation. Immediately, as if time had frozen, silence fell over the entire cavern. The only exception to this phenomenon was the gradually shattering crystal in Fated Fern's hand. Before the infant golden dragon could smash its claw at Lionheart, a magic spear several hundred meters long suddenly appeared above the infant dragon and struck its head. Tier 5 spell, Destruction Spear. Boom. The infant dragon's titanic body instantly collapsed to the ground, the impact creating a crater several dozen meters deep. The space surrounding the crater even turned into a dark void. The next moment, a damage value exceeding 10 billion appeared above the infant dragon's head. In addition, not only did the infant dragon's berserk state get interrupted, but the infant dragon was even powerless to push itself off the ground. The power of the destruction spear stupefied everyone present. Even Shifeng never thought that the sealing crystal would hold such a powerful spell. The destruction spear was just slightly inferior to the Great Demon King's attack from before. "Good. Everyone, attack with everything you've got," Shifeng shouted. Ignoring the fact that he was still in a weakened state, he activated Power of Darkness, which allowed him to move his body. He then charged straight at the incapacitated infant dragon. As for everyone else, they, too, activated their berserk skills at Shifeng's command, instantly doubling their basic attributes. Damages exceeding 100 million appeared above the infant dragon's head one after another. 10%, 6%, 3%. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Just as the infant dragon was about to recover from its incapacitated state, Shifeng activated Divine Providence before using his strongest trump card. Tier 3 skill, Blade Awakening. Tier 4 skill, Lightning Edge. The next moment, Shifeng, who had entered a transcendent state, brandished the abyssal blade. A river of light then descended upon the infant golden dragon's body. -135,474,514, -129,435,471, -264,854,214. A series of damages exceeding 100 million appeared above the infant golden dragon's head in rapid succession, the attack thoroughly plundering its remaining HP. Chapter 2792, Astonishing Harvest. Chapter 2792, Astonishing Harvest. The infant golden dragon uttered a mournful cry as its titanic body crashed to the ground. Subsequently, an unprecedented silence descended on the cavern. We did it. We succeeded. Everyone heaved a deep sigh of relief when they looked at the infant dragon's corpse lying on the ground. Simultaneously, an indescribable sense of joy and excitement also appeared on their faces. After all, they had just created a miracle of full dragon-slaying battle. Even if their opponent was merely a Tier 4 infant dragon, they had still slain a real dragon. The next moment, before the survivors of the team could recover from their joy, brilliant flashes suddenly enveloped their bodies as their experience bars filled up rapidly. The amount of EXP the infant golden dragon awarded was leagues above the EXP from ordinary mythic bosses. Even Shifeng leveled up 3 times consecutively, reaching 32% of level 140. As for everyone else, they gained even more levels from the raid, with Lionheart reaching level 141 and Yuluo reaching level 139. Lifeless Thorn and Solitary 9 even went from level 127 to level 138. The amount of EXP everyone received stupefied them. Nobody thought that killing a level 140 infant dragon would grant so much EXP. Of those present, only Shifeng and Lionheart did not place much concern on their levels. After all, as veteran Tier 4 players, they knew very clearly how easy it was for Tier 4 players to gain levels. In fact, they could most likely attain level 150 in 10 days, reaching the minimum requirement to challenge their Tier 5 promotion. However, players would not necessarily be able to get promoted to Tier 5 just by meeting the level requirement. After all, players would have to create a powerful mana body of their own. Compared to the levels he gained, Shifeng was much more concerned about the infant golden dragon's loot. The infant golden dragon they had killed was a dragon in the truest sense, not one that the main god system had weakened drastically. This point was clear just from the EXP the infant golden dragon awarded. Compared to the magic dragon clan that Shifeng had killed some time back, the infant golden dragon was like an entirely different creature. Some time after the infant golden dragon died, sacred light descended from the cavern ceiling, illuminating the entire cavern. Simultaneously, melodious hymns also echoed in everyone's mind. It seems divine providence did its job. Shifeng sighed in relief when he saw the sacred light shining down from the ceiling. Although divine providence increased his luck attribute significantly, the hidden attribute's effects would be diminished when dealing with monsters at the superior mythic standard or above. And while the infant golden dragon was considered only a mythic monster, it was still part of the dragon race. It was far stronger than ordinary superior mythic monsters of the same level. Hence, the fact that he managed to trigger a divine hymn was truly a stroke of luck. Of course, part of the reason he managed to trigger a divine hymn was most likely this being the first kill of a real dragon in the ancient god's domain. Meanwhile, as the divine hymn descended, a system notification also entered everyone's ears. System, congratulations. You have killed a Tier 4 infant golden dragon. You have obtained the Dragon Slayer title, World Reputation plus 100, and 1 gold legacy treasure chest. Crap. There's such a benefit as well. Bloodblade was astonished when he saw the system notification. Initially, he thought that they would be working for Shifeng for free. He never imagined that slaying the infant dragon would earn them such astonishing rewards too. At this time, even Lionheart was surprised by this situation. After all, the rewards were simply too lucrative. Firstly, the Dragon Slayer title would allow them to enjoy the status of a high noble in the various cities of God's domain. In fact, their authority would be even greater than the typical high nobles, close to reaching that of a city lord. Not to mention, with the Dragon Slayer title equipped, Their basic attributes and physique would increase by 20% when dealing with dragon-type monsters in the future. As for the awarded Gold Legacy Treasure Chest, it was something all Tier 4 players would dream of obtaining. The Gold Legacy Treasure Chest had a considerable chance of awarding a Legacy Book, which would grant the user with a significant number of Legacy skill points when used. The treasure chest also had a high chance of containing rare Tier 4 skill and spell books, as well as a small chance of containing a Legacy guidance for the road beyond Tier 4. These rewards were far more valuable than weapons, equipment, and magic crystals. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that the Gold Legacy Treasure Chest's value was equivalent to a fragmented legendary items. For some people, the treasure chest was even better than a fragmented legendary item. Meanwhile, aside from the reward notification, Shifeng, Lifeless Thorn, Solitary 9, and Yu Luo received a second system notification. System warning. The world of God's domain has noticed your existence as an outsider. You will be expelled from the world in one natural day. Sure enough, it was a success. Shifeng revealed a faint smile upon seeing the system warning. If killing the infant golden dragon and altering a small portion of God's domain's history could not get him out of the ancient God's domain, he would really have a headache. After all, he had already achieved his original goal in coming here, and he still had many matters he needed to deal with in the modern God's domain. He simply couldn't afford to waste time here. As for the matter of earning various resources here, that was supposed to be a long-running project. Moreover, the amount of resources he could obtain depended entirely on the Skyflare Adventurer team's strength and resources. Meanwhile, Skyflare's development couldn't be accomplished overnight. This is great. I can finally go home. As for Yu Luo, she, too, grew joyful when she saw the system warning. In fact, she felt even happier at seeing this system warning than when she received the Gold Legacy Treasure Chest. While everyone rejoiced over the Gold Legacy Treasure Chest they received, over 100 items appeared in midair and began descending to the ground. The sight of the infant golden dragon's loot made everyone present momentarily forget about the Legacy Treasure Chest. BIOIB, the aura of items can actually reach such an intensity. Crimson Billow was astonished as she studied the items that were gradually piling up on the ground. Just what kind of items dropped? Could there be a legendary item? This question plagued everyone's mind. The reason for everyone's reaction was the aura that the infant dragon's loot radiated, which practically rivaled that of superior mythic monsters. Even ordinary Tier 3 players would have to expend a lot of effort just to approach the loot. At this time, only Shifeng managed to remain relatively calm. This was because he had heard of other people slaying dragons before. Only, the dragons that the God-ranked expert teams killed back then weren't Tier 4 infant dragons but adult dragons at the peak of Tier 5. According to what he had heard, the sight of those dragons' loot was truly a spectacle to behold. Just the visual phenomenon the loot created had covered a radius of over 10,000 yards. The combined aura the items radiated had also been so powerful that even Tier 4 players couldn't approach the loot, only Tier 5 players and above could do so. In comparison, the visual phenomenon created by the infant golden dragon's loot only covered a radius of several hundred yards. The aura the loot radiated was so weak that even Tier 3 peak experts could approach it if they gritted their teeth. Hence, Shifeng didn't find this outcome particularly surprising. However, the infant golden dragon's loot and Tier 5 adult dragon's loot wouldn't actually have a significant difference in quality. What difference in quality there was would only be akin to the difference between an epic item and a fragmented legendary item. It wouldn't be as significant as the difference between a fragmented legendary item and a legendary item. After all, both kills were dragons, one side was just slightly stronger. Moreover, as Tier 6 God-ranked experts were responsible for killing the adult dragons, the loot quality was reduced. In comparison, their team had defeated a Tier 4 infant dragon without a single Tier 5 player on the team. If one were to talk about raid difficulty, their team faced a much greater difficulty than the Tier 6 God-ranked expert teams. I wonder if it dropped a complete Saint guidance. If one did drop, I might be able to improve my mana body further. Shifeng prayed inwardly as he looked at the items slowly piling up on the ground. At this time, compared to materials, weapons, and equipment, what he hoped to obtain more was a legacy guidance. This was typical of Tier 4 experts. After all, even with multiple fragmented legendary items, a Tier 4 expert wouldn't be able to go up against Tier 5 existences. As for the possibility of the infant golden dragon dropping a legendary item, that was utterly impossible. As far as Shifeng knew, players couldn't obtain legendary items through killing monsters. It didn't matter even if the monster in question was a dragon. At best, monsters would only drop fragmented legendary items that could be repaired into legendary items. Thus, every legendary item was incredibly precious, and a Tier 5 expert would be fortunate to obtain even one. After another dozen seconds or so passed, all of the items finally landed on the ground. Shifeng immediately approached the mountain of loot and began sorting through it. The spectating Skyflare members couldn't help drooling, wishing they could help Shifeng with the loot. Guild leader Black Flame has really hit the jackpot this time. I wonder if a legendary item dropped. If he gets a legendary item, his combat power would most likely skyrocket and approach the Tier 5 standard, Wind Chase aside as he enviously watched Shifeng collect the loot. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. He finally understood how big a gap divided Tier 4 and Tier 5 existences. It was even larger than the gap between Tier 3 and Tier 4 existences. Ordinary weapons and equipment couldn't make up for this gap. Only the rumored legendary weapons and equipment might work. If Shifeng could get himself a legendary weapon now, he would truly become an invincible existence. After all, no Tier 4 player could go up against Tier 5 existences yet. Meanwhile, after working non-stop for 10 minutes, Shifeng finally finished sorting through the loot. Once he organized the loot, he had to press his hand against his chest to suppress the excitement in his heart. The loot dropped this time was simply too amazing. It was definitely the most amazing loot he had ever seen. This included even the loot he had seen in his previous life. Setting all else aside, just the golden long sword sitting in his bag had very nearly made him faint from happiness. This weapon was one of God's Domain's 10 great legendary weapons as well as one of God's Domain's 36 famed swords. It was also the prototype of the weapon Voidbreaker and could cut all existences. Its name was the Light of Two Worlds, also known as the World-Breaking Gold. Chapter 2793, World Authority. Chapter 2793, World Authority. The golden longsword covered in crimson divine runes sitting inside his bag was definitely the dream weapon of all swordsmen. So, that's why the Light of Two Worlds was rumored to have been destroyed and no longer existed in God's domain in the past. Shifeng couldn't help his elation as he inspected the long sword in his bag. As it turns out, the weapon can't be obtained in the modern God's domain but only in the ancient God's domain. Light of Two Worlds, one-handed sword, fragmented legendary rank, equipment requirement, strength 6000, tier attack power, 270% of strength, attack speed, 3% of agility, all attributes, increases according to the user's level. When equipped, attacks gain the mana annihilation effect, causing a spatial collapse in an area of 4 by 100 yards. Attacks have a 50% chance to deal 300% damage, strength increased by 70%, agility increased by 60%, intelligence increased by 30%, endurance increased by 60%. Attack speed increased by 40%, ignore levels plus 50, all sword type skills effect increased by 40%, all sword type skills plus 1 level, effect of mana increased by 50%. Additional skill 1 spatial slash, tier 441 attack, increases strength by 200%, power by 2 ranks, up to tier 5 advanced rank at maximum, and attack range to 1000 yards. Cooldown, 40 seconds. Additional skill 2 golden soul, tier 4 improves perception of magic elements by 200% and mana control by 300%. Reduces all concentration consumption by 70%. Duration, 1 minute. Cooldown, 6 hours. Additional skill 3 world breaker, tier 4 consumes half of the user's concentration and mana to enhance the Light of Two Worlds, granting the weapon the power to break worlds for 1 attack. Forcibly increases the power of attack by 1 tier, up to tier 5 advanced rank at maximum. Cooldown, 1 hour. Created by the ancient god of light. The Light of Two Worlds possesses the power to cut all things. The divine power sources within the weapon have been destroyed by an inexplicable power. However, As the weapon itself is still intact, it is possible to fully repair it by injecting new divine power sources. Divine power source injected, 02. Despite being the prototype of the Void Breaker, the Light of Two Worlds had still managed to rank number 1 among God's domain's 36 famed swords. One could easily imagine how powerful the weapon was. Although the Light of Two Worlds was currently incomplete, just the basic attributes it provided already made it far superior to even the Abyssal Blade. It undoubtedly had the highest attack power out of all the one-handed swords Shifeng had ever seen. Not to mention, there were also the outrageous skills the weapon carried. Just by wielding the Light of Two Worlds, a Tier 4 swordsman would be capable of exchanging one move with a Tier 5 existence. This was a feat that was impossible with ordinary fragmented legendary weapons. However, while the Light of Two Worlds was incredibly powerful, its usage condition was also astonishingly high. Without the several fragmented legendary items on Shifeng, he wouldn't be able to equip the weapon. Meanwhile, the Light of Two Worlds' appearance could also be considered heaven-sent. Now that Shifeng had reached level 140, both the Twilight Blade and Killing Ray could no longer keep up with his level. Hence, he had mainly been fighting with only the Abyssal Blade all this time, with the Twilight Blade and Killing Ray as support. However, now that he had the Light of Two Worlds, he could arm both his main and subarms with adequate weapons. In fact, even if he failed to collect the 2 remaining fragments of Solomon's sword, he wouldn't have to worry about finding a replacement weapon. Moreover, even if he did manage to complete Solomon's sword, the complete Light of Two Worlds wouldn't be the slightest bit inferior to it. The only problem was that divine power sources were incredibly hard to find. In fact, Shifeng had only ever heard rumors of divine power sources, he had never actually seen one before. This was because divine power sources were far more valuable than god crystals. They were the power sources of gods, and they carried incredible strength. The value of a divine power source was comparable to a legendary item. Meanwhile, the Light of Two Worlds actually required 2 divine power sources. It seems I'll need to have the guild investigate divine power sources. Looking at the Light of Two Worlds, Shifeng inwardly resolved to repair the weapon, no matter the cost. Legendary weapons were far too rare in God's domain. Now that one had appeared before him, it would be a huge waste if he did not try to repair it. Meanwhile, after seeing Shifeng had finished sorting through the loot, Lifeless Thorn and the others approached him with curious eyes. "Commander, did anything good drop this time?" Looking at Shifeng, Solitary 9 asked in a whisper, "Did a legendary item really drop?" They had just defeated an unrestrained Tier 4 infant dragon. If Shifeng said nothing good dropped, nobody would believe him. Solitary 9 was very curious to find out just how excellent the infant golden dragon's loot was. After all, there was still no news of any player obtaining a legendary item, so nobody could tell how powerful legendary items were. If a legendary item had truly appeared among the items dropped, they would have hit a huge jackpot. "Aren't you guys taking legendary items too lightly? There's no way a legendary item can drop from a monster." Shifeng smiled and shook his head when he saw the excited expressions of Solitary 9 and the others. He then said vaguely, "However, while there is no legendary item in the loot, there are several items whose value is comparable to legendary items. To me, at least, these items are almost as valuable as actual legendary items." He had no intention of telling everyone the specifics of the items dropped this time. This was because the loot was truly astonishing. Aside from the Light of Two Worlds, there were 2 other items that could easily cause a sensation among God's domain's various powers. One of the 2 was a magic array design. Although the design only recorded a master magic array, this master magic array was more valuable than even some grandmaster magic arrays. This was because this magic array existed only in the ancient God's domain. The 12-array magic world. This magic array could increase the density of all mana within its area of influence by 200% and players' mana perception by 100%. Although it only had 2 specific functions, if brought back to the modern God's domain, it would definitely stand at the peak among all magic arrays in existence. As for the second item, it was a mysterious flame. Be it in the ancient God's domain or modern God's domain, mysterious flames were incredibly rare items, especially Tier 3 mysterious flames and above. A Tier 3 mysterious flame was just as rare as a fragmented legendary item. Meanwhile, the mysterious flame the infant golden dragon dropped was the Tier 4 mysterious flame Hellfire. A Tier 4 mysterious flame was something Shifeng had only ever heard about in God's domain. According to rumor, after reaching Tier 4, mysterious flames would all possess astonishing power and a variety of incredible effects. Take the Soulfire, for example. It was a mysterious flame capable of annihilating a player's soul, leaving the said player with no choice but to delete their accounts and restart from scratch. Such a feat was impossible for most Tier 5 existences. Moreover, even if a Tier 5 existence had the ability to wipe out a player's soul, it would only work on low-tier players. As players reached higher tiers, their souls would also grow stronger and become more resistant to destruction. After a certain point, even a Tier 6 god wielding the power to annihilate the immortal souls of players wouldn't be able to force the said player to delete their account. Nevertheless, the Tier 4 Soulfire could easily annihilate even the souls of Tier 3 players. Only after reaching Tier 4 would players become somewhat resistant to the Soulfire's strength. This was also why the corrosive effect of the mysterious NPC's soul chain had weakened considerably after Shifeng had reached Tier 4, allowing Shifeng to live for much longer. Now, he had obtained a complete Tier 4 mysterious flame. It was different from the incomplete soul fire that he had gained through the mysterious NPC's soul beast. The other dropped items were similarly very precious. Out of the 100+ items dropped, over 30 were legendary materials such as dragon claws, dragon teeth, dragon scales, and dragon blood. There were also over a dozen master recipes and epic equipment forging designs. The rest were mainly inferior legendary materials and level 150 epic weapons and equipment. 2 materials stood out among all that bounty, both inferior divine artifact ranked materials. The Dragon Eye and the Dragon Crystal. These were the quest items Angelica Teresa needed. Meanwhile, after hearing Shifeng's words, Lifeless Thorn and Solitary 9 stopped asking questions. They understood that the items dropped this time were extraordinary and could not be revealed. Moreover, Shifeng had already answered the main question plaguing their minds: there was no legendary item among the dropped items. You Luo, you guys start resurrecting the others. We'll return to Meteorite City afterward, Shifeng said to the team's healers as he looked at the dead Skyflare members' corpses scattered around the cavern. Once everyone was alive again, Shifeng opened a spatial gate in the direction of Meteorite City. Thanks to the spatial gate, the return trip, which should have originally taken a dozen hours or so by flying ship, only took 4 hours, astonishing Skyflare's members. If not for the spatial gate's long cooldown and short duration, it would have definitely been considered a godly skill in God's domain. After returning to Meteorite City, Shifeng completed all his transactions with Lionheart. Aside from the Crimson Dragon flying ship, Lionheart also purchased an additional 20 crystals of souls and 100 drops of soul water, which netted Shifeng an additional 6 million magic crystals. Lionheart also used 3 million pieces of mana ore, which was treated as equivalent to 750,000 magic crystals, to exchange for another 5 crystals of souls. Although the mana ore's price had been slightly inflated, this was unavoidable, as purchasing mana ore in bulk was incredibly difficult. Purchasing too many would naturally raise the ore's market value. However, for Shifeng, getting 3 million pieces of mana ore for the price of just 750,000 magic crystals was already a bargain. After the transactions with Lionheart, Shifeng passed 30 crystals of souls and 1,000 drops of soul water to Yang Ya for her to conduct future transactions with the Skyflare Adventurer team. At the same time, he also tasked her with secretly purchasing some of God's domain's rare items. Finally, after settling all his business affairs, Shifeng handed the Dragon Eye and the Dragon Crystal to Angelica Teresa, who was still recuperating from her injuries. As soon as he handed over these 2 items, not only did Angelica's favorability of him increase by 100 points, but she also gave him a Tier 5 legacy guidance she had obtained from a sword saint. Shifeng was a little surprised by this reward. Is this the hidden reward for not bringing Angelica Teresa on the raid? While the infant golden dragon had indeed dropped a lot of excellent items, it hadn't dropped any legacy items. This situation had rendered Shifeng quite speechless at the time. Now, Angelica Teresa directly handed him the legacy guidance he wished for dearly. After the conversation with Angelica, Shifeng immediately received a system notification. System, congratulations. You have completed the inferior mythical quest World's Choice. You have gained World Authority +2. System, you have obtained World Authority. World Authority currently at level 1. Please feel the specific effects of World Authority on your own. As soon as the system notification appeared, an indistinct chain became visible around Shifeng's body from the void. A moment later, this chain suddenly disintegrated, and he immediately felt the world around him becoming much clearer than before. He could even sense that his intimacy with the world of the ancient god's domain had improved slightly. The world was no longer as hostile toward him as before. So, these are the effects of World Authority. Shifeng was astonished when he sensed the changes to his body. His affinity with the magic elements was at least 50% better than before. His perception of his mana's operating principle had also improved significantly. After careful observation, he noticed that the layer of white mist that hindered his perception had thinned out by roughly 30%. With such a tremendous improvement, his chances of constructing a Tier 5 mana body would increase by at least 20%, at least 10 times more than what a legendary item could provide. Meteorite City, Silver Hotel. After spending half a day experiencing the benefits of having World Authority, Shifeng decided to take a break. I've already made major strides in my mana control in merely half a day of experimenting. At this rate, my control over mana can probably reach the Advanced Master Standard in just half a month. Shifeng looked at the time in astonishment. Initially, he had estimated that he would take 3 or 4 months to reach the Advanced Master Standard for mana control. Now, he would need only half a month to accomplish this feat. The amount of time he could save with World Authority was astonishing. After reaching Tier 4, what was most important to players would no longer be weapons and equipment but their control over mana. The stronger a Tier 4 player's mana control was, the easier using skills and spells would be. They would also have an easier time constructing their Tier 5 mana body. From what he knew, one's mana control needed to be at the Advanced Master Standard at the very minimum to construct a Tier 5 mana body. In other words, so long as his mana control reached the Advanced Master Standard, he could begin attempting to construct a new mana body. "Commander, it's almost time," Lifeless Thorn said as he entered the room. "Okay. I've finished all my business here already. We can go now." Shifeng nodded. Afterward, Shifeng, Lifeless Thorn, and Solitary 9 went in secret to a forest several thousand yards away from Meteorite City and met up with Yu Luo, who had been waiting there for quite some time now. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU Guild Leader Black Flame, will we really be able to return? Yu Luo couldn't help asking as she counted down the time. She had tried all sorts of methods to leave the ancient god's domain, yet none of them had succeeded. Although there was the system notifications assurance this time, she still felt a little doubtful. "Relax. The system won't lie to us," Shifeng said, chuckling when he saw the anxious look on Yu Luo's face. Shortly after Shifeng finished speaking, the system's timer of 1 natural day struck 0. Immediately, the space around the 4 shattered, forming 4 small spacetime tiers. An invisible force then pushed them into these spacetime tiers. In the blink of an eye, Shifeng's group of 4 disappeared from the quiet forest as if they never existed here in the first place. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,